Malchus never affects tongues.
All right, so getting back to the Machlokas Baal, Maor, and Ramban, all right, which is a very, 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 very complex Machlokas, and I empathize with the amount of facts that need to be juggled. Okay, so let's get some assumptions in place and make sure the terminology is clear for everybody. Okay, first of all, there are three kinds of minhagim, right? Minhag Talmid Chacham, in general, forget the Baal, Maor, and Ramban, just in general. Minhag Talmid Chacham is the greatest type of minhag. Why? Chacham.
They know things. They know what's
Right. They're using the appropriate system to create minhag. There's a Kabbalah, and it's for the right reason, right? Okay. Minhag Hamon.
Could be other good ways.
Not the system, but they got good ashkaf.
Invalid, invalid.
Well, it's not a for now. It's not a kiyum.
They have the proper
right?
top. They have
But no,
they
but
have proper use of the system.
no, it's not a kiyum. Well, no, at this point, what we said last time, it's not a kiyum, but rather what we're saying is that we just the fear of undermining it is what drives us to keep it in place. It's not. There's nothing great about it. It's very nice they had the right effort, but the fact is they didn't employ a Chazal endorsed system. That's what we said up to this point. So therefore, our fear is we don't want to undermine it because what will that lead to?
Yeah.
So the fear of zilzal is what drives us insofar as retaining the minhag. And then you have minhag taos, which up to this point, what do we think minhag taos was?
Completely invalid.
Completely invalid. Meaning the very term minhag taos is almost a compliment.
It's a misnomer.
Right, it's a misnomer, correct? Because it's not a minhag, right? And that's how we assumed all along.
And how did it not gain traction?
So all along, you would argue that if there's a taos if they think the thing is actually usher, so how could there any minhag emerge? There's no idea minhag if they think the thing is usher to begin with. All right, so again, minhag Talmid Chacham, minhag Hamon, minhag taos. That's one. Next, daito lachzor. Okay, what's daito lachzor? My intention is to a Miamian, right? And as we assumed all along, the way almost every Rishon learns, all these cases are infused with daito lachzor. All right. So just keep in mind, because I remember someone asked this before. When the Gemara goes through the cases, another factual thing. The Gemara goes through the cases of the three cities, Yehuda and Hillel, right? You have the first minhag by the brothers bathing together. You have the minhag by sitting on the bench. You have the minhag by the sandals. I've mixed up the order, all right? In all those situations, what happens? Hillel and Yehuda go there, right? What happens? They go against the minhag makom. They get called out, right? And then what do? They accept the fact that they don't say, "Oh, to your minhag." Instead, what do? They accept. They realize that this is a legitimate thing, and they sneak out the side door. One of them does. Okay. Well, don't say that yet. Up to this point. Okay. Now, what else do we know? We also know that the Gemara then skips ahead to. I'm just pushing ahead the Gemara. The Gemara has the case of Rabbah. What did Rabbi Rachana do? He ate that meat thing, the fat, right? That in Baal is a problem, but in Eretz Yisrael is perfectly fine, right? He gets called out on that. And then eventually the Gemara concludes by Rav Ashi, the whole reason why he was allowed to do it is because he was daito lachzor. But if it was ain't no daito lachzor, right, then of course he had to noheg like the people in Bavel. Clear? Okay?
Yeah.
And then finally, I know I'm going in reverse order, but there's a reason why. Finally, you have the case of Rav Yosef, by the case of the rice dough. So what happens? Someone comes out to Rav Yosef, gets to a certain town, whatever the name of the town was, Chuza, or Chuza, right? Chuza or Baisham, whatever. And what happens? Rav Yosef, they say, in this town they eat their mafresh rice dough from their mafresh rice dough as if it's challah. And what does Rav Yosef say? Nichlazar, that you can go out and eat it publicly, no problem whatsoever. Okay. With all that said, now let's go through the fact sheet. Okay. So the Baal Maor, Yosef saw this minhag. He said there is no way that this could be a legitimate thing. Right?
No way they actually think it's
let me rephrase that. Rav Yosef said, that you should not follow this minhag. You have every right to undermine the minhag. You can go ahead and eat the rice dough in front of them. That's what. So again, the Baal Maor says what? The Baal Maor says, and this is along the same lines as the Ran. What is your dominating principle? What is the main principle that guides us? Daito lachzor. Remember, the Baal Maor says it right from the beginning. He says, daito lachzor, the fact that I'm a Miamian, I'm going to New York, but I have every intention to return back to Miami, and I have the date stamped on my airline ticket, right? Because of that, that's daito lachzor. So that really should be your guiding principle. Until who comes along and qualifies that? Rav Ashi. And says, no, there's also ain't no daito lachzor. So at this point, in the Baal Maor's world, you have two things. You have daito lachzor, right, which is as long as your intention is to return back home, that's what guides you. Versus ain't no daito lachzor, which means what? If it's Eina Daita Laksor, who do you follow?
Yeah,
You hold there. You hold there.
What?
Hold like New York.
Right, you hold like New York. Is that clear?
Yeah.
Or is it just to be clear, according to the Baal Maor, and I'm not saying there's no Kiddush here. According to the Baal, according to the Baal Maor, at this point, and there's no Kiddush here. Baal Maor, and this is how we've been learning all along. According to the Baal Maor, you have two principles: Daita Laksor, Eino Daita Laksor. If it's Daita Laksor, you always go by where you're from, and if it's Eino Daita Laksor, you go by where you moved to. There's no Kiddush there, right? Okay, so. All right, so if that's the case, but now what's the competing?
It's not competing.
What's the issue according to Baal Maor? When do I have to stop being so daita laksor?
When Yishna Adam becomes.
Well, you use his lashon. I know Aishan Adam. Use his lashon. His lashon is
When
that
there's no Talmid Chacham in town.
what?
When there's not a Talmid Chacham in town.
Well, that's a cute way of putting it, but let's be a little more general than that. In other words, daita laksor doesn't beat out what? Okay, right. Or right, it's meaning that because what are you doing when you're Aishan Adam? You're mattering it.
You're mattering, creating.
Correct, and that creates
That
machlokas.
doesn't mean zilzul.
No, that doesn't mean zilzul. It's not zilzul.
That's what you want to say.
No, it leads to zilzul. Fine. That's just semantics.
Okay.
Just semantics. Okay. So the problem is that daita laksor, it's always daita laksor except for when? Except for when, if I undermine it, it'll lead to a zilzul. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So, all right. So now, again, so in point 3. That's the Baal Maor. Okay? However, if there's Talmid Chachamim there, right, I have every right to go against the Minhag. Okay? Okay. Now what happens if I go into a city and there's a Minhag Talos there? According to Baal Maor.
Matir.
I can openly go against it. So if we go anywhere you go as a Minhag Talos, you can openly go against
Without asking Talmud.
it. Without asking a Talmid Chacham.
You don't even. It's only if you know that if it's a minhag tos.
Only if you know it's a Minhag Talos.
So that in that case, you are in that case.
So this listen to this Yerushalmi, because this Yerushalmi is key for both the Baal Maor and the Ramban. The Yerushalmi says it's on Parak Dal Halacha Aleph in Psachim. The Yerushalmi says this. It says Rav Avram b'Shem Rav Avon Kol Davar she'ain. Listen to this. Kol Davar she'eino. No saying anything yet, by the way. Because I know. Okay. Kol Davar she'eino yodea shehu motor v'toa bo be'isser, which sounds like Minhag Talos. Okay. Nishal v'heimatir lo. They ask, meaning we, the Hamon asks the Chacham, and he's allowed to matir it. Okay? However, the Chol Davar Shehu Yodea Shehu Mutar V'hu Noag Bo Be'Isser Nishal Ein Matir Lo. But if it's a minhag where they do it correctly, it's a Hamon minhag. In that situation, if they ask the Chacham, he cannot matir it. So again, if it's a minhag talos and he asks the Chacham, he can matir it. If it's a minhag,
What?
we don't want to be bound by this minhag anymore.
Why they do that?
What do you mean? Just what? And also, you got to remember, there's two ways of learning the Yerushalmi. There's the Baal Maor's way and the Ramban's way. The Baal Maor learns something from that Yerushalmi, and the Ramban learns something different, which we're not even up to yet. What's the now? Just to make it easy, what are the Ramban's? Now the Ramban changes everything, right? What does the Ramban say? The Ramban says, he says, 1 second, we got a big problem. All right, let's take the case of Hillel and Yehuda. All right, what's his problem with the case of Hillel and Yehuda? So after they went to the bathhouse and they were called out by the people, what should they have said?
They should have said, we don't care about you, or matter the minhag.
They should have matir the minhag, right?
Isn't it okay?
Come on, can we see it
We
today?
said until now it's okay minhag, right?
What?
We said until now that was
If it's a real minhag,
Yeah.
right? There's no way they could have matired it for sure.
right.
If it's a real minhag, if it's a minhag hamon, okay, could Hillel and Yehuda have matired it?
No.
No.
And they didn't. So
They didn't.
What do you say it is minhag?
Ooh, so what's Ramban saying?
It's
It's
told.
been a con-
So he holds it has to be minhag talos.
Why?
Okay, we'll answer that.
Good call.
He holds it has to be minhag talos, right? But in it being a minhag talos, the fact is that why did they want to undermine it? Because undermining will lead to what? Zilzal. Okay, but he holds all those cases are minhag talos. Every case that we've done so far is minhag talos, culminating with the case of Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef is the case of minhag talos. That's his critical case. Why does Rav Yosef's case have to be minhag talos?
There's no way he would even have
The Gemara can never entertain a havamina that Rav Yosef would challenge openly a minhag hamon. It's absurd.
I guess it.
You can't even give me a conceptual havamina. Okay, that's going to be the critical thing to answer. Okay. Well, at this point. Okay. But the problem, though, is that the problem we have with the Ramban is that the Ramban lends a lot of weight to minhag talos. Doesn't mean you can't undermine it. But the Ramban's saying that when Hillel and Yehuda went to the bathhouse, so there's a minhag talos there. It was a stupid minhag, dumb, incorrect, to say that brothers can't bathe together. It was dumb. And yet, what happened? When they were challenged with it, rather than say, what you're doing is stupid, right? What do? They put their tail between their legs, so to speak, and said, "You're right. We agree. We acquiesce that this is a legitimate thing." Okay. So what I want to know is like this. Okay. Let's just start with a small point in your Yerushalmi, and you'll see how I can build off of that. Because sometimes with these things, you start small and build bigger. Okay. This will be Arya's segue in just a second. All right. Getting there. No. I want to. So okay. So you have this Yerushalmi. Okay. So the Baal Maor is going to. Let's start with the Ramban. The Ramban is going to say, right, that a minhag tos can only be undermined when.
When
it's sircha.
Right, and when you're not allowed to undermine it if what? Zilzal.
No, I thought that was a definition.
In the case of mafresh orez, if I go ahead and tell the people, this minhag is crazy. If they would have listened to Rav Yosef, what would have happened?
Okay, fine.
They'd be mizalz on areas of challah.
Fine. So
okay,
it's
so according to Ramban, okay, good, fine. So you want to say it that way? Perfect.
Yes.
The Ramban would hold that a minhag talmid chacham you can never undermine.
Yeah.
The Ramban would hold that by minhag hamon, it doesn't matter if there's zilzal or not. You can't undermine it. You can only undermine a minhag tos. That's the only one you can matir.
What about
and when
within that circle?
it's all right. No, you can only undermine it when it leads to because it leads to zilzal. Now let's listen to this Yerushalmi, and you'll see what point I'm trying to bring out here. Okay, according to Ramban, I just want to focus on Ramban. The Ramban says that there's going to be your cue. Right? The Ramban says what? The Ramban says that when it comes to minhag tos, right, I have no right to undermine it because what am I always concerned about? Okay, but one second. But in this case of the Yerushalmi, we have something very strange here because the Yerushalmi says if there's a minhag tos, nishal v'hei matirin la. Doesn't that seem to be flying in the face of the Ramban's very assumption of you can't matir minhag tos? Ramban says openly. Ramban says that that you have no right whatsoever to undermine a minhag tos because you're afraid of zilzal, right? But this Yerushalmi flies in the face of that because the Yerushalmi says. If there's a minhag tos, nishal umatirin lo. Nishal umatirin lo. So what's the Ramban learning? What's the Ramban learning from this? Why is the Chacham allowed to matir the minhag here? They're very. I'm not saying. The very fact that they're in, just like Yaakov said it beautifully, that you said it before. The fact that they're invested in the very halachic system itself, they're trying to matir the thing. They're asking, can this be mutter? That means we're not worried about what? Zilzal. It shows that they're not, again, to put it in a Baal Batish way, they're not so bad, right? We're not worried. The chashash zilzal doesn't emerge. Okay, so 1 second. So if that's the case, now take one small step back. So why is the Ramban interested in preserving minhag tos? What is the Ramban's idea of minhag? He's a very different idea of minhag of what the root of minhag is than the Baal Maor. What's the Ramban's idea of minhag? There's one word, as you said it before. There's one word that sums up. No, there's one word that sums up minhag, according to the Ramban. Kabbalah. All right, sorry, I say it my way. Kabbalah. Even though Kabbalah is technically the right way to say it. Kabbalah. What do I mean? What does that mean? What does that mean? Pinsky.
So, in terms of how minhag comes about, the system of minhag is through Kabbalah, so they have to accept it from their fathers. So, in terms of minhag, it is a legitimate minhag. But just the actual nihag that they do is ta.
Right.
What does Kabbalah mean?
So Kabbalah means that they were Kabbalah means that they were. It means that they accepted a certain type of nihag. Okay, there was an acceptance of a nihag. Once they do that, but the point is this: according to Ramban, once the acceptance takes place, there's now a reality to the minhag. It's irrelevant. It doesn't matter how it emerged, meaning through tos. So you call the Baal Maor, just give me another step here. According to the Baal Maor is going to say, once tos is there, of course it's going to be undermined. Right? That's why if it were a case of if the case of Hillel and Yehuda was minhag tos, they would have gone out and said, this is crazy. So the Baal Maor is not medayik on the nishal. So that's what Ramban's deal. The Baal Maor is going to say one simple thing you learn from this Yerushalmi. That as soon as the tos is in existence, what does the Chacham do? Gets rid of it. That his focus is on the Chacham getting rid of the minhag. You understand? He doesn't care about nishal. That's a cute deal. That's very nice, but get out of here. At the end of the day, what's the point? Get rid of that minhag. Wipe out of the system. Now, let's focus on Daito Laxor. Now you'll see why I'm taking all these pieces and putting it together. Okay, Daito Laxor. So the Baal Maor holds that Daito Laxor that drives you throughout the process of minhag. So whenever you go anywhere, what are you defined as? Miamian, always. You always go from where you're from, okay? But the Ramban comes along and seems to just completely ignore Daito Laxor. And forget, I don't care about the methodology of his proof. He ignores it.
Right.
What's his proof though? No, but what's Ramban's proof? No, that's the Baal Maor. Why does Ramban say Daitalaxor is not such a big deal? You guys remember? It was in the sheets.
Sorry.
Because when is Daitalaxor mentioned?
Later.
Later. So he's saying the fact that it's mentioned later on means it's not such a big deal. Okay? Daitalaxor is not such an overarching principle.
Oh.
So what's the Ramban? So what I want to know is
Good job, dude.
what? You'll see why I'm going in this direction. So Ramban says forget Daitalaxor. Daitalaxor is Rav Ashi's thing. But in reality, right, you're always defined based by what? Based on where you are. Which, by the way, if you think about it, it's not a crazy idea. In other words, it's true I'm going back to Miami, but right now the reality is what? If I'm in New York, by the way, so just as a side note, but you can see as a proof, okay, that's really the svara for the Chacham, the Chacham Tzvi and Reb Chaim to say that when I'm in Eretz Yisrael, even if I'm going back to America, I keep one day. Why? Because in this makom, and where I am right now in Eretz Yisrael, is there any reality to a second day Yantav? No. So what kind of idea is it to give a second day? I'm saying this idea is very similar. Wherever you go, okay, the makom I go to, that is my reality. The makom defines who you are. So if the Ramban throws out Daitalaxor, and if we say the Ramban holds that the makom is what defines you, you're defined by the makom that you're in. So then the Ramban also, that's the other point, the Ramban says also, it's impossible to say you could ever actually challenge a legitimate minhag. If it's a minhag hamon, obviously minhag Talmud Chacham, if it's a minhag hamon, a case can never exist where someone can legitimately challenge it. So therefore, that's what drives Ramban to redefine all the cases as minhag tavs.
Right, not because
I'm saying, just understand this, again, I'm going to repeat this point, okay? The Ramban holds there's really no idea of Daitalaxor in any overall overriding sense. In essence, you are defined based on where you are. So if I'm in New York, so there's no reality of minhag Miami anymore. I go by the makom. Whatever minhagim exists in this makom, that's what those minhagim are. That's why the Ramban emphasizes, okay, what's the extent of minhag? How far does minhag go? Tchum. Why? Because that's your makom. Right? The makom defines you. You're defined. Your niho can only, the only reality in minhagim is whatever that city's minhagim are in your framework. You're not a Miamian at all. You're a New Yorker. Ramban makes no differentiation between a minhag Talmud Chacham and minhag hamon. In both situations, you can never undermine them, ever.
Of course.
There's no differentiation between them. There's only by minhag tos is there an out. So what is that telling us? What's the Ramban telling you that minhag is? He has a very different idea than the Baal Maor, which is the idea we had all along about what minhag is. What's Ramban's idea of minhag?
It's not just
Baal Maor's categories are minhag Talmud Chacham.
minhag hamon, minhag tos.
Minhag Talmud Chacham, can you ever undermine it?
No.
No. Why?
That's always good.
Okay.
He knows he's doing it.
He knows what he's doing.
He thought it was because of
Always
Talmud Chacham.
Minhag hamon, can you undermine?
No.
Can you undermine minhag hamon?
No.
It depends on what?
Depends whether or not it's going to lead to
Zilzal, correct. So, and by the minhag tos, can you undermine it?
Of course.
Always, because you're not worried about zilzal. Okay, the Baal Maor.
Is
Did not employ a system of hora, and because he didn't employ that, so now we can never say this is a good thing. But there's a problem though. We always have to be concerned about the possible damage that can emerge. But what's the key thing I'm trying to bring out here is that according to Baal Maor and all the other Rishonim, the problem with the minhag hamon is that they didn't employ, right, the normative system of hara. Because they didn't do that, we can never endorse it. So what's the Ramban saying? What's he saying? But the Ramban's telling us, right, that he doesn't differentiate whatsoever between minhag Talmud Chacham and minhag hamon. Right? He says they're the same thing. So meaning that it's irrelevant about the Chacham's involvement, right? So what must that tell you?
Anything pertaining to system is good.
Okay, good. And meaning that, so as long as they do a Kabbalah, right, that means their Kabbalah, and they're producing a halachic reality through their Kabbalah. They're producing a halachic reality through their Kabbalah. Okay? Without hara. There's no hara here. They're producing a halachic reality through their Kabbalah. Okay? But one second. So why is that sufficient? Why is that enough? All right, so you have to put this in the right halachic framework, which is what's allowing them to do this. Right? In order for it to be treated as a real halachic thing, it must be something. All right, every minhag shares one thing in common. There will be an exception later on, but for now, every minhag has one thing in common, which is what? It's always what they know it's mutter, but what are they doing? So now, what is every minhag?
No, that's 2 out of 3. Sorry.
No, we'll get to Talos in a second. Every minhag, you'll see what the issue of Talos is. Let's take minhag hamon and minhag Talmud Chacham, right? But just focus on minhag hamon for now, all right? Minhag hamon, what do we have there? In every minhag hamon, you have they know it's mutter, but they're treating it like it's usher, right? Even by the case of minhag tos, even by that case, what's the mistake they're making?
They're not preventing anything.
No. What's the no? They're
think
making
it's
error.
usher.
They still think it's usher, right?
Oh.
Every case has that in common. They're always driven to think that the thing is usher. Tos is just that they didn't have the right method to come to that conclusion. But in every case, that's what they're doing.
No.
So
They
what does
relate
that?
to it. They don't think it's us.
Exactly. They relate to it like it's usher. In both cases, they relate to it like it's usher. What does that sound like? What are they doing? What does that sound like? There's a precedent for this.
Siyag?
Thank you. It's a siyag. The Ramban is saying something that's insanely profound. The Ramban is suggesting the following idea. Rabbanan come along and Rabbanan create siyags. That's what Rabbanan do. They create siyags. A minhag is a siyag that just lacks the chazal stamp of approval. That's what a minhag is according to Ramban. That's why minhag tos can exist as a minhag, because at the end of the day, it's a siyag. They're following the same siyag idea. They're saying we want to be machmir. We want to be machmir. We want this thing to be usher. Because they share that, so that it's considered in the Ramban's eyes a minhag. It's not like according to Baal, what's a minhag? A minhag is simply it's bad. It's just that by undermining it will prevent something worse will emerge. But not according to Ramban. The Ramban says that a minhag is actually a type of siyag. And I can give you proof down the road why that's the case.
Type or a siyag?
It's a type of siyag. But it's a
What else
siyag.
should be? What
It's
else
lacking.
should
But
be?
what's it lacking in? It's lacking in what?
Stamp.
Endorsement,
right, 'cause it wasn't done by the
endorsement or
Rabbanan.
creation? Endorsement or creation?
Well, no.
It could happen after.
It wouldn't matter. No. Why does it matter? Because even if a chacham comes up with it, you treat it the same way.
It has
Even if the chacham comes up with it, even if a chacham says, I want everybody to be noheg isra here, right? You treat it no differently than the hamon minhag, according to Ramban. Why? Because at the end of the day, it's not it's lacking the chazal stamp. In other words, it wasn't done through the process of a derbanan, but since it's a siyag, it's the Torah siyag. That's what gives it a reality. So according to Ramban, a minhag is actually, now let's get it to its most categorical points. According to Ramban, minhag is a positive halachic reality, whereas according to Baal and all the other Rishonim, there's no positive reality to minhag. Rather, it's just something that we can't undermine. We can't undermine it. But I'm showing you in the Ramban's world how the Ramban came to the conclusion that this thing is a positive thing. Because he must see this as a siyag. And that's what gives it its legitimacy. Yeah.
So
The thing we see is by talos, right? You see that talos is a way out. But think about it. What's the isra? If you're over a minhag, what isra are you over?
Rabbanan.
No.
You're not over this at all.
Well, you're not over the isra. You're not over isra derbanan.
You're over
You're
minhag.
right. You're over isra minhag. In other words,
Which
it's a
means-
siyag, but it's its own rules because you're not over derbanan.
What's this for minhag?
We'll get to that later.
What?
That's the next thing I have to take
what
out.
I'm saying.
But what isra you? But what isra are you over if you don't abide by minhag? Forget if you go against it. If you don't abide by it, what's the isra? It's not an isra. It's not an isra derbanan. You understand? It's not an isra
Only
derbanan.
equivalent Ramban is there an is.
If you create,
is a thing.
if you create
It is
an
a
alternate halachic reality called minhag, so now what must be contained within it? Some sort of isser. But according to Baal, there's no such thing like that. The Baal would just say
Please do.
that's why you can't be over. You can't be over because you're worried about zilzal. Well, that's a whole separate. That's an idea in general of shmiras and mitzvos by the people. So you see that. That's why even if I'm in New York, according to Ramban, I can never go against the minhag makom. Why? Because if I'm in New York, right, there's only one reality.
Right.
The minhag.
Yes, the other is a thing.
It's absurd.
Hey,
Right.
It's other in order to prevent the zilzul.
But according
It's other is
to Baal
Just prevent Zilzal, so it's only in effect.
but
You're doing it
right,
properly.
according to Baal it's always
right.
died to
So depending on
Laxor,
if it'll
and it's a question of when is there a conflict with that. But according to Ramban, of course I'm bound by the minhag when I'm indoors. Because there's no other reality other than that minhag. That is my reality. There's no other reality other than that minhag. There is no Miami in my framework. If I'm in a hotel room, I don't care how many years I've been in Miami, there's only one reality, that is of New York.
Why?
Why?
Yeah.
According to who? According to Ramban?
Yeah.
Because he doesn't want, the Ramban can't tolerate an idea of competing minhagim.
Or he doesn't.
Why?
Because there'd be no way, in his framework, there's no way to differentiate one from the other.
Why?
That's why he doesn't bite that, because how would you differentiate?
I don't get the question.
Okay, let's say you apply, let's say daito laxor is an intrinsic principle. Okay.